Most anglers waste time learning dozens of knots, always searching for the best one. I only use 3, and they cover every situation in bass fishing. They're quick, easy, and hold up to giant bass every time. I'll show you each one and why they beat the complicated stuff. We go fishing to catch fish, not to tie knots. That's why I want ones that are easy to tie. I don't spend much time doing it, and they darn sure better not break when I do catch one. Fishing for double-digit bass for over 2 decades on Lake Fork here in Texas, I put knots to the test. So let me share with you how I select knots, and then I'll run through the 3 that I use, and then finally I'll show you how to actually tie them. So I have 5 basic principles that I use to judge a knot. And number 1, first and foremost, we're looking at catching fish with a knot, not trying to win a knot tying competition. Now, I'll admit, if there's a YouTube video, if there's a fishing show that has it, or if I'm at like a trade show or something where they have a knot tying machine and you get to test them versus your buddies, I'll be the first one to try that or watch those videos, and they are fascinating, comparing a Palomar versus a double clinch versus every other knot in these obscure ones and stuff. It's great entertainment, and I definitely file that information away. It's important to know some of that. But the main thing is, I'm trying to catch fish. The way I evaluate it, when I use these knots in the field, do I break off on the hook set? Am I landing fish? Is it coming uncoiled? That's what really matters. Does it work when I'm out there in the field? All the lab stuff, a lot of time that's a steady pull, or maybe the person tying it isn't doing it perfectly, whatever. I don't care what it's doing in the lab. Does it catch fish? That's the most important one. Now, along those same lines, number 2 is any well-tied knot is going to be stronger than a poorly tied knot. For instance, say they do a test and it says, a Palomar is the number 1 in their test, or a double hitch or something like that. Whatever it is, if it's well tied, it may be stronger than your best knot. But if you tie one well, any well tied one, any decent, reasonable knot versus one that's not well tied, that thing's going to slip, it's going to break, it's not going to be that strong. So learning to tie well, that's really important. Now, again, along the same lines, the more you tie a knot, the quicker and the better you tie it. If you only have a few knots and you've done them for years and years, those things you can do them in your sleep. I don't care what the conditions are. You can quickly tie it. Your fingers, you just have that muscle memory. You tie them quickly. If you're always searching out that new knot, when you first do it, if you've ever done it, watch the video over and over and you're watching, you're trying to do it. And at that point, it's like 2 out of 10 are good. And then it's taking you 2 minutes to tie a knot, and most of them aren't that good, and you have to cut and retie and stuff. The more knots you have, the less likely you are to tie 10 out of 10 perfectly and strong. Plus, it's just going to take you longer. So that's another reason. The fewer you have, they're going to be quicker and better. Now, number 4, again, along the same vein, the easier and quicker you can tie a knot, the more likely you are to do it. In the boat, you feel that little rough spot, and it's okay. If you have to tie an elaborate knot, it's going to take you forever. You're less likely to retie it. And I promise you, when do you break off? For me, it's rarely, if ever, at the knot. It's always because, I got lazy, I caught a fish, he had it deep, I didn't want to retie, I've been fishing around docks, I'm sick of retying all day, and then you chance it, and then you break off at that abraded area. I promise you, a well-tied knot, I don't care which one it is better than a dinged-up piece of line, especially fluorocarbon or braid that, the braid gets fuzzy and gets weak. The fluorocarbon is notorious for a weak spot. It's going to pop right there. If you have any knot versus a roughed up line, that quick and easy to tie one, you're more likely to do it. It's going to be stronger. And then number 5, this is specific to leader knots, but I'll tell you what, those are the most complicated, most time consuming. When you're in a boat, you get a little bit older. If you need reading glasses, if the wind's blowing with that little 6 and 8, 10 pound test when you're doing the small little line, the braids, sticking to your fingers and blowing in the wind. And then if you have cold fingers and stuff, a wet day, it's just hard to tie those. And the guys that tie the FG knot, I'll tell you what, most of them are doing it the night before. They hate to do it in the boat. To me, the complexity when you get to leader knots is where you just don't want to tie that leader knot again, and you're going to chance it. Let's be honest, you're going to chance it with a roughed up leader because you don't want to sit down and take all that time. So simplicity, quickness, and ease of use, it really plays into that leader line more than any of them. All right, so I think you get the theme right there, quick and easy. So let me show you the 3 knots I use. I use one for fluoro and mono. I use a second one for braid. And then I use a third one for leaders for braid to fluorocarbon. I'll talk about each of the knots first, and then at the end, if you don't know how to tie these, I'll actually show you how to tie them as well. So I'll start off with the knot that I tie 85-90% of the time. I'm using fluorocarbon most of the time to tie on lures, and using a little bit of mono, say for like top waters. But what I've used for years is the Trilene knot. And it's a clinch knot, but the line is doubled through the eye of the hook. And it's also called a double loop clinch knot or a two-turn clinch knot. But it's just a clinch knot with two lines through the eye. And basically with any mono or fluorocarbon line, when you double the line through the eye of the hook, I'm always going to go with something like that. Just a stronger, that's been proven in the testing. The Trilene is always rated really high, especially on dead pull. There's some other knots that'll rate higher, and it's easy to tie is a big reason I use it. Now, you could make the argument that the Palomar is the king here, and it's super strong as well, and all those knot wars and stuff. It's probably the easiest one to tie, and it's super strong. If you say I go with the Palomar and call it good, I can't totally argue with that. Here's the one reason, though, that I started using the Trilene knot back in, gosh, it was like the mid-90s, late 90s, and I've used it more and more over the years to the point now where the last 5 years for all that stuff, fluoro and mono, it's the only one that I use, and it's for a key reason. The big thing about a Trilene knot, when you have, here's your main line, and your tag end on a Palomar jig or Palomar knot, the tag end points straight back up towards the main line. With a Trilene knot, your main line heading back to the rod, the tag end goes down. And, we obsess all the time over weedless baits. You want a swim jig that has this perfect cone head, and you want crankbaits that are running true and streamlined. And what do? When that tag end is sticking out there, when you're coming through the water with that crankbait, that's just one thing that's sticking out on one side. And if you use like a double San Diego jam or all these complex knots for fluorocarbon, yeah, they might be a little bit stronger. But if your main line's here and you have 3 tag ends with those sticking off on this side, and you're trying to get your crankbait to run perfectly true, well, it's dragging on the leading edge of that crankbait. You've got these 3 tag ends over here. And same with anytime you have swim jigs and bladed jigs and stuff. I'm coming through the grass, and what's the leading edge? When I'm coming up to every stalk of grass, that tag end on that Palomar are those 3 tag ends on like San Diego jams and all that. They're all sticking out here on the side, and they're going to catch it. Now, is it enough to totally keep you from catching fish and stuff? No. But when I'm trying to pitch a jig into cover, or there's slimy moss and stuff, to me, that tag end pointing the other way on a Trilene knot, that's just one thing less to catch. It's more streamlined. It tests near the top of all the knot charts. I don't have a problem whether I'm flipping jigs, and this is like 25, 35, or 25 and 30 pound fluoro on say like flipping a jig or something, down to using shaky heads and wacky worms and stuff. And I'm a slackline hook setter. When I do it, I drop the rod tip, and I snap. And so I let him have it. I do not break off at the knot. Unless there's a flaw or something where I tied a bad knot and did get a cinch down, or there's a bad spot in my line, I'm not breaking off on it. Real world, for years and years, this thing holds up. The tag end stays out of the way. It's my go-to with fluorocarbon and mono. Switching over to braid, I'll tie this one basically when I'm fishing frogs, buzz baits, choppos and whopper ploppers, punching, stuff like that. I'm using straight braid, and this one actually did come down to what I saw years ago at one of the knot wars, and it's just a uni knot where you double the line through the eye of the hook first, not double it over like a Palomar, but you pass it through twice. I'll show you that real quick. And then make like 7 to 10 wraps. It cinches down really easy. The uni knot is a super easy one to learn and to tie, so I can do it in the boat very easily, but it's super strong. And that's the biggest critique that you get on braided line, that impact strength. Sometimes it'll slip. Knots have a tendency to slip on you, so guys have like done triple loops and stuff through the eye of their hook on Palomar knots and stuff. This one doesn't slip. I don't break off on the hook set, and it holds up. And simply, it's a uni knot, which is one of the most basic knots. You go through the eye of the hook, And you don't double the line over, you just come through. So if I came in from the right side, I go all the way back over to the right side again, my right side, probably your left, and then just come through the eye of the hook again. You know, a Trilene knot, you leave that loop at the start. On this one, you just cinch it down so it's through the eye of the hook twice, and then you wrap it around the line. You make that loop, you wrap it 7 to 10 times, cinch it down. It's strong, it never slips. I'm good on my braid. And then the final category, that brings us to leader knots. You know, these have really gotten popular lately, you guys, in using braid to fluorocarbon leaders, jig head minnows, and wacky worms, Nico rigs, and stuff. I actually, in the 90s, started using them a lot on Lake Fork. Braided line came out in the early 90s, and we used anywhere from 50, 65 up to 100-pound braid, and it was great at first, but then the fish got line shy pretty fast. So I was actually using 25 and 30-pound leader monofilament at first, and then I use a lot of fluorocarbon short leaders, 2.5 up to like 4 foot long, but for flipping and pitching, and I still use that some. A lot of top flippers like to use that when you're around a little bit less cover. If I'm punching, I'm not worried about it, but if I'm just flipping to the bank and stuff, with that 30-pound fluorocarbon leader, you don't have to retie all day. It's super strong. And the leader knot that I used, and I use this one, the same one all the time. I've tied this since the 90s. And I don't know if you can see it there. It's not that big. This one is, just 8 or 10-pound mainline braid to about a 10-pound leader here. But what I use, I picked up one from the fly fishing world called a surgeon's knot or a surgeon's join. Now this one you might have a little bit of argument with me in terms of what you tie. And I understand if you want something different. The FG knot has really taken off lately. That one's super strong. Here's the thing about the surgeon's join. Surgeon's knot. Super easy to tie. At the fly fishermen, a lot of them, they just do it with like 2 wraps. I'll do 5 to 7. I can do it quickly. I just pull it through. I've almost never had this thing, and again, I set the hook pretty hard, whether it's a shaky head or a wacky or something, and I'm cracking it because just force of habit for 30 years of setting the hook. I mean, I let him have it at close range, and when I'm flipping and I'm using anywhere from a 20 up to 30-pound fluorocarbon leader with that 50 or 65-pound braid, I'm pitching right there to a lay down, and I set the hook as hard as I can. I do not have it break off at the knot. I mean, I'm not going to say never, but I mean, I'm struggling to remember a time. And if I started doing that, I would seriously look at all these other, the Uni to Uni and the Albright and Alberto and FG, all this other stuff. I don't have it break off there. Here's the downside of it. When I get snagged and it's buried in there and I have to do a dead pull, it's pretty much 99 out of 100 times, and I don't care how big the leader is and how big your braid is, it's going to break at the leader knot. So I'm going to lose my whole leader, and I have to retie it. The good news is, and I'm tying at most 10-foot leaders, I can sit down and tie this thing under a minute in the wind, in the rain, cold fingers and stuff. It's super easy. And that's the big thing about these leaders. You start to get one, and say you want a 10-foot leader, and it starts getting down to 9 foot, and you're retying because so many times with the finesse stuff, the Nico and the wacky, I mean, it's getting braided, and you're having to retie like every fish, and all of a sudden it's down to 6 feet and shorter. It's getting too short. You don't want to sit down and have to tie that. People with the FG, they're going to tie it a lot of times the night before. The workaround is tie up 3 rods, 5 rods, 7 rods, which is great if you're a specialist and a pro and you're on the Great Lakes and you had a day off to prepare for the tournament and you want to tie all those. But under normal circumstances, what you're going to do is you're going to have an abrasion in your line, or it's going to have a nick or something. Instead of wanting to tie that new leader, you're going to press it, and then sooner or later you've been catching all those dinks and thinking, whatever. And it's the end of the tournament day, or it's the end of your fun day fishing, and you throw up by one log with that wacky worm, and then boom, you snap off, or you have it and you start fighting that thing and pop. The biggest fish of the day, you lose it, and it's all because you're too lazy to retie. That's where the surgeon's knot, it's so easy to tie. Yeah, the knot may be a little bulkier, so it clicks more going through the guides and stuff. I don't know. It works for me. I've used it for decades. Literally, it's quick and easy to tie. To me, that's easily the determining factor. That's why I stick with that simple knot and don't worry about it. You can see the simplification and focusing on things that actually help you catch more fish versus worrying about all the other things that don't. That's a huge part to me. I have a full playlist on this. I'll put it in a pinned comment below, put it in the description. If you want to learn how to tie these knots, here we go with some video of how to tie each one. So let's start off with the Trilene knot. And these are from some blogs I did years ago with FLW. But the first step, you make a loop through the eye of the hook. So the line's doubled through the eye. And you'll notice here, you don't have a big long tag end. If you're working with a leader line or something, you're not chewing up a bunch of it. With the wrap stage here, I typically make 4 to about 6 wraps. If I'm using really big line, I only wrap it about 3 or 4 times just because it's hard to cinch down that line. Most of the time, though, I'm going with like 5 wraps. You want to get at least 3 good quality ones in there, but when you're talking more 15 to 10 8-pound test, I like about like 5 wraps. Now this one is the uni where I double it through the eye of the hook for the braided line. And you see you go basically through the eye of the hook, the same you do with the Trilene knot, except for you don't leave the loop. You pull it down tight here. And this knot from here on is just a basic uni knot. The only difference is in a regular uni knot in this, I go through the eye twice. Number of wraps here, I like a minimum of 7. If it's smaller, I'll go up to like 10. But this knot cinches up really nice and neat, and it holds strong. But because braid likes to slip, I like a lot of knots. On this one, the line got short, so they don't wrap it as much. But you really want like 7 good wraps around the loop. And then you pull the full loop up like that tight, and then you pull the main line and pull it down. The knot's not super clean in this one, but it should snug up to a really nice, at the end there, it's pretty good. Now we'll go into the leader knot here, the surgeon's knot. In this one, I'm typically tying leaders anywhere from 2-3 foot up to about 10-11 feet, something like that. Now you want a decent amount of overlap when you start this. If you don't have enough here, it's going to be harder to tie the knot. So I like a pretty good sized overlap, even longer than what they're showing here. And basically you get the lines going in opposite directions. The fly fishermen only make like 2 wraps. What I typically do is 5 is pretty standard, especially if I have bigger lines, say like 50 or bigger braid going to like 20 or 30 pound fluoro. And then if I'm using smaller like 8-10 pound braid and 6, 8, 10 pound leader, then I use like 7 wraps. Now the main thing I'll do here, and you don't see it that much, but when you take both lines and you pull it through, I like to pull the leader through and then snug it up just a little bit each time I do it. He's not actually snugging it up. That helps the knot seat itself. But if you keep on drawing it just a tiny bit tighter every time, that'll help the knot kind of just thread better. And then I'll make a total of, like I said, 5 to 7 wraps through there, pulling the leader line through every single time. And then snug it down. Each time after you pull it through, just snug it down just a tiny bit more. When he pulls this tight, it's not real even. You need to make sure you have all 4 ends and draw them together at the same time very evenly. You want to have the wraps so they stay woven. He kind of loses grip on all 4 of them, so it's not nice and neat. So it gets a little more lumped up. That's where practicing helps a little bit, but a real steady pull on all 4 lines is really key. And it should draw up where you have at least 4 good weaves there, where it's nice, clean weaves. Tagging the tag end, trimming that. The braid side, you can leave that like almost a ½ inch, fuzzy and stuff. That's not on the leading edge, doesn't really matter, and the braid will kind of unravel over time, so I like to leave that long. The fluorocarbon side, that's what hits going through your line when you cast it, so I cut down the fluorocarbon end as tight as I can.